Hey guys, it's Emma Vigling with TYT Politics. Republicans are at it again, attempting to kill voting rights in America. And make no mistake, the Democrats have metaphorical blood on their hands with how they have suppressed voter participation in the past, especially during the 2016 primary. We all remember this. But this would affect all elections, what the Republicans are trying to do, and on a massive scale. So here's some background. The 1988 presidential election had really low turnout, incredibly low turnout, which was a small part of the reason that George H.W. Bush won. It was the lowest voter turnout since the 1920s. To combat this and increase participation, the Democrats drafted the National Voter Registration Act, a bill that would require states to allow voters to register at DMV offices, Department of Motor Vehicle offices, and other public agencies. At the time, Mitch McConnell was a young senator from Kentucky, a young whippersnapper. He was elected in 1984, and he led the fight against this bill. Bush naturally vetoed it when it came to his desk in 1992. This bill wants to turn every agency, bureau, and office of state government into a vast voter registration machine, McConnell said in 1991. Gasp. Motor voter registration, hunting permit voter registration, marriage license voter registration, welfare voter registration, even drug rehab voter registration, McConnell said. That same year, McConnell, who is now obviously the Senate Majority Leader, wrote that, quote, "Low voter turnout is a sign of a content democracy." Just wrap your mind around that. McConnell long has believed, because it's politically convenient for him to believe this, that the less people participating in a democracy, the better. This view, by the way, contradicts almost every democratic, small d, political scholar that studies healthy democracies and democratic republics. But, oh well, I thought you were a strict constitutionalist, Mitch McConnell. McConnell didn't get his way in the end when Bill Clinton was elected to the presidency, defeating Bush and Ross Perot. He signed this bill into law. The result? In its first year in effect, more than 30 million people registered or updated their registrations through the NVRA. Roughly 16 million people per year have used it to register ever since. But the Republicans, now led by Mitch McConnell in the Senate, are still on the warpath against democracy. In recent years, Republicans have sought to gut the law. In 2013, the Supreme Court weakened a key part of the Voting Rights Act, ruling that states with long histories of voting discrimination no longer needed to clear their election changes with the federal government. After winning that fight, Republicans are now going after the NVRA in what voting rights advocates say is a thinly veiled effort to make it more difficult for Democratic-leaning constituencies to register to vote, and far easier for state officials to remove them from voter rolls. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court will hear the newest challenge to the law concerning whether Ohio can remove voters from the rolls who don't vote over a 6-year period. If a voter in Ohio misses an election, doesn't respond to a subsequent mailing from the state, and then sits out 2 more elections, he or she is removed from the registration list, even if this person would otherwise be eligible to vote. Critics of this process say it turns voting into a, quote, use it or lose it right, and will open the door to wider voter purges. Ohio purged 2 million voters from 2011 to 2016, more than any other state, including over 840,000 for infrequent voting. At least 144,000 voters in Ohio's 3 largest counties, home to Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, have been purged since the 2012 election, with voters in Democratic-leaning neighborhoods twice as likely to be removed as those in Republican-leaning ones, according to a Reuters analysis. A federal appeals court ruled in September 2016 that the state's purging of infrequent voters violated the NVRA, which states that someone cannot be removed from the rolls, quote, by reason of the person's failure to vote. As a result of that ruling, 7,500 people who had been purged from the rolls were reinstated and were able to vote in the 2016 election. Ohio says it should be allowed to remove these voters from the rolls under the NVRA, claiming that, quote, a failure to respond to a notice, not a failure to vote, is the sole proximate cause of removal under its purge program. Ohio adds that if the Supreme Court finds that the NVRA does prohibit its actions, it would raise, quote, serious constitutional questions about the law. So this Wednesday Supreme Court case will be dealing with that Ohio purging. But just look at that. 2 million purged, 840,000 for infrequent voting, and only 7,500 were re-registered for the 2016 election. Ohio has a population of 11 million people. 2 million is a huge portion of that population, and it's a swing state in the election. But Ohio isn't the only state that's attacking the MVRA, even though that's what the Supreme Court will be hearing this week. In 2013, Kansas implemented a law championed by Secretary of State Chris Kobach that required people to show a birth certificate, passport, or naturalization papers to register to vote. The proof of citizenship law ultimately blocked 1 in 7 eligible voters who attempted to register, nearly half of whom were under the age of 30. The ACLU sued, alleging that the law violated the MVRA by preventing people from registering at the DMV. The ACLU won a preliminary injunction in 2016, with a federal appeals court ruling that if the law remained in effect, quote, there was an almost certain risk that thousands of otherwise qualified Kansans would be unable to vote in November. The ACLU's case against Kobach is going to trial in March. If Kobach wins, the precedent will allow more states to pass similar proof of citizenship laws. If he loses, Kobach will no doubt intensify his efforts to amend the MVRA. The MVRA has been abused by organizations like the ACLU, Kobach told the New York Times Magazine last year. They've twisted the words to try to say it prevents proof of citizenship laws. If no one ever heard of Chris Kobach, he has made it his life's mission to take away voting rights from minority and immigrant Americans. He is perhaps one of the most insidious people in American politics. He is a truly bad individual. This movement is real on the right, and this is what Bernie Sanders said would be the worst case scenario of a Trump presidency. I believe he was on some talk show, Fallon or something, that instead of expanding rights, Republicans take this opportunity to further restrict voting access, so much so that it makes it even more difficult for Democrats and progressives to win on any level, president or dog catcher. They've been doing it on a local level for years, and it's scary. So we'll have to see what this conservative Supreme Court decides on this issue. This is an issue that's going to be in the public sphere for a really long time. It affects you, it affects me, it affects everyone. It's really important that we stay alert on how our voting rights are being dismantled, how they're being upheld, and make sure that we're up to date on the fact that, you know, Trump gets all these headlines for tweeting and doing all these horrific things, but behind the scenes, Republicans are making it really difficult for Democrats and progressives to win just by kind of tweaking these laws in their favor, and in this instance, completely overhauling a law that brought so many people into the fold in terms of voting in America.